Hello, and welcome to Wilmington College's annual celebration honoring the life and legacy of one Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. My name is Chip Murdoch. I serve as Director of Diversity and Inclusion and also the Director of Service and Civic Engagement here on the campus. Each year, we conduct this program in honor of Dr. King, but we try to show our appreciation not only in congregating together, but also in serving the community. So this is a great day for Wilmington. It's a great day that we can still pull this program off in a virtual format. But more importantly, we were able to send some students into the community to serve those in need. You will hear more about that later. Now, for those of you that know me, you probably know that I'm not normally a guy that will attach a theme to a program. However, this year was different. Given what we've gone through in 2020, given what's in our rearview mirror and some of the residue that still lingers, there's one phrase that still resonates, and it's resonating in my heart, and it's a phrase that we echo in my office each day. And that is the phrase of "you matter." So I figured it was appropriate this year for our theme for the MLK program to be "You Matter." You'll hear more about that as we go through the program. But also, to go along with "You Matter," I also want us to keep in mind King's vision of a beloved community and the importance that each and every one of us play in that community. And whether you're communicating the phrase "you matter" or you're hearing it, the person in front of you should be the one that is mattering at this point. And whether you're communicating that phrase or you're hearing that phrase, the fact that you matter is the thing that we want to emphasize this evening. So going forward in this program, we're going to tell you for the next few minutes that you're going to hear some of the traditional elements of our MLK program. We're going to have musical selections, we'll have a few presentations, we're going to have reflections, etc. But I don't feel it's appropriate to start with the program without getting some supernatural clearance. So what I want to do right now is present to you our campus minister, Nancy McCormick, who will provide our invocation.
Good evening. I would like to read a couple of Martin Luther King's prayers as a way to honor his life and his legacy. As a man of peace, let's pray. Oh God, help us to walk together, pray together, sing together, and live together until that day when all God's children, black, white, red, and yellow, will rejoice in one common bond of humanity, which is the kingdom of our Lord. It is our prayer that we may be children of light, the kind of people for whose coming and ministry the world is waiting for. Give us strength and power to see that darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that, and that hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Help us, O Christ, our beloved brother, to live and serve in your love, in your name, in your example. Amen.
Can you feel that? I hope you can. You're listening to the Legacy Troupe. The Legacy Troupe is a collective of drummers that come together each year at the beginning of the MLK program to perform a piece known as The Call. The call is simply this. The call is a collective cry out to our ancestors. It's a shout of gratitude for those who have paved the way for us. What I ask for you to do during the call is this. I want you to think about 3 people in your life, your personal life, who have paved the way for you, who have made sacrifices for you, and who have reminded you and re-emphasized to you that you, in fact, matter. Now, the MLK program is all about his legacy. However, I think it's important for us to be able to have a mindset of gratitude that's personal to us before we move on and talk about King's legacy. I think it's important for us to remember as individuals the sacrifices that were made in our life. And there's a reason that the Legacy Troupe performs on djembe drums. In many cultures, many African cultures, many indigenous cultures across the planet, drummers are revered. Drummers are given a level of respect in their communities because the drum is such a powerful instrument. It's used for communication. It's used for ceremonies. It's used for war. There's a reason that when we were brought over as slaves, they took our drums from us. There's a reason for that. The reason this drum is significant, the reason drums are revered in a lot of cultures is the fact that there were sacrifices made for that drum to exist. For this particular drum, 3 lives were taken. The life of the tree, the life of the antelope, and then the life of a goat. Those things are not taken lightly when drummers approach their drums. Neither should we take things lightly as we approach life, because people have paved the way for us. So that is why we perform the call. And this is how we do it. I would give you a 4 count, and then if we were in person, you would yell out the name of that particular person you want to honor. It kind of goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you dig it? One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how it would work in person. But we understand we're not in person. But for this last time, what I want you to do, I just want you to internalize and think of that person. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, is what is known as the call. Please enjoy the rest of the ceremony. Wilmington College believes heavily in its relationship with the local community. This MLK program is a great example of that. For every year that we've presented this program, we've always incorporated members from our local community. And Bible Missionary Baptist Church has been a part of this program since day one. BMBC has been a pillar in this community. BMBC has been a point of refuge for many folks here in town. And I'm very excited to say that a pandemic did not interfere with their participation this year. So without further ado, I present to you Bible Missionary Baptist Church Praise Team. Now, the next person I'm presenting to you is new to the WC family. He just joined us here at the beginning of January. However, if you get a chance to meet him, you will find that this man has brought an excitement and an energy to campus that is quite palpable. He's hit the ground running, and I'm excited to see what the future holds. This is the first of what I hope to be many introductions, but ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the 19th president of Wilmington College, Dr. Trevor Bates.
Good evening, friends. My name is Dr. Trevor Bates, and it is my honor to be with you this evening as we celebrate the life and legacy of the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King is remembered because he was an imperfect man with a dream of a more perfect world, a world where our children would be able to see one another for who they truly are, God's children. Today, we might argue that things like the truth, decency, dignity, fairness, and the rule of law are under attack. And I'll tell you, friends, this is not a place that we haven't been before. So how do we move forward together? I believe in order to move forward, we should take a look back to understand that there are complicated issues that got us to where we are today. Some might argue that the United States of America is the wealthiest, strongest, most prosperous nation this world has ever seen. But there are two sides to the coin that explain how we got there. One side is a history that includes slavery, discrimination, violence, murder, and many other atrocities that no one is proud of, but are nonetheless true. On the other side of the coin is a history of people working hard as they possibly can, to move up the socioeconomic ladder, to make a better life for their children, to plant the seeds of a future where their children could see a life and a legacy that is built on love and compassion for all people. All people was not the way that we began. In 1776, July 4th, the Declaration of Independence stated, among many other things, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Although that was a radical idea at the time, a very powerful idea at the time, it was also incomplete and intentionally exclusive. The truths at that time were meant to address some of the challenges that people were facing. People at the time who were considered men. That didn't include women, people of color, or people native to that land. Over many decades, many years, this country has been filled with people who have fought on the side of those people who were not included. One such group, the Religious Society of Friends, also known as the Quakers, had these radical ideas that things like slavery should be abolished and that men and women were equal as they were created. The Religious Society of Friends is one of many groups who put themselves in a position to help others when they didn't have to help us to find our way, to help us to see that light and to move toward it progressively, slowly, one step at a time, together. We have found our way through this darkness before. And friends, I'm confident that we'll do it again. What we must do is band together, regardless of the differences that we have in our political, economic, social, religious, or other areas of our lives. We must boil it all down to the fact that each one of us is a human being who deserves dignity, who deserves compassion, who deserves love. And there will be times on that journey where we will get tired. We will get frustrated. And we will wonder, where do we go from here? How do we help this world become a more fair and more peaceful place? And I believe that just as we have done it in the past, we will find and we will continue to seek and search new ways to be successful together. The truth is, we've lost our way before. We've forgotten that people who didn't have to, in our time of need, came to our aid to support us, to love us, to help us to move forward. We've been afraid before, afraid to use our voice, afraid to stand between those who could not protect themselves and those who might do them harm. We've been divided before on a number of issues, and yet we have continued to find a way, to find that critical compromise to help us move forward. And we've been in the dark before. But Bishop T.D. Jakes reminds us that every new day begins in the dark. For those key hours in the morning, when no light is present, we must stand ready. We must move forward, inch by inch, ensuring that when the light indeed comes, that we are ready to make up any ground that we lost in that period of darkness. But I believe in order to move forward together, we must do three things. Number one, we must educate ourselves, our family, and our neighbors. We must understand that each one of us is a human being with desires, with love, with compassion, with needs, and we can work together to help one another. Second, we must expose ourselves to people who might love, look, and live different than we do, so that we can understand that the eyes of a mother on her child, or the time that a father spends with his children, is just as important whether you are black, brown, white, short, tall, you name the characteristic that might divide us. I believe that the characteristics that add us together are so much greater. And finally, third, I believe we must exercise our voice. When we see something wrong, we are obligated as members of the human race to help one another to succeed, understanding that our imperfections will show and that we will find times, as we have in the past, where we've lost our way, where we are afraid, where we are divided, and we find ourselves in the darkness. But as we know, and as we have been reminded by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so we must educate, we must expose, and we must exercise our voices. My mother said to me as a young boy, "Son, make a difference. Work hard. Do good when you don't have to, when no immediate rewards are present, and when no one important is watching." What my mother was saying to me at the time is, "Son, you're going to be given opportunities. And when you have those opportunities, son, make sure that you pay them forward. Make sure that you remember where you came from. Remember, son, that things won't always be good. And there will be times where others will be in need of your service." I've dedicated my life to making my mother proud, trying to serve when I'm called to serve, to make sure that others have what they need to be successful. I will end with what I believe is the most powerful quote Martin Luther King Jr. ever said. He challenged us. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, just keep moving forward. And I would add, together. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Trevor. Next on the agenda is Ursula McTaggart. She's an associate professor of English here at Wilmington College, and she will present to you this year's recipient of the Nedra Gordon Scholarship.
Good evening. My name is Ursula McTaggart, and I'm an Associate Professor of English at Wilmington College. Tonight, I am here to present the recipient of the Nedra Gordon Endowed Scholarship for the 2020-2021 year. Nedra Gordon was the mother of 4 Wilmington College students, and she wanted to give money to a scholarship that would support people who did work in their communities and improved the lives of those around them. She asked that the scholarship be given to those who, quote, did something that wasn't all about themselves once in a while. This year, the scholarship goes to Savannah Manson, a junior who is majoring in biology and health sciences. Savannah is concentrating in trauma and pediatric nursing. She's an active member of the Black Student Initiative, WC Pride, and the American Medical Association Student Group. She's also part of SAFE, the Survivor Advocacy, Fellowship, and Education Group. She works as a peer mentor and a student ambassador. She exemplifies this scholarship and its commitment to community service. Congratulations to Savannah.
Thank you, Ursula, and congratulations, Savannah. Now, each year when we talk about the MLK program, I get the question from a few of wondering who is going to be our keynote speaker. For the last few years, I haven't had a keynote speaker. And the reason is this. I believe in tapping into the pulse of our community. I'm tapping into the pulse of our campus community and hearing from the people that I cross paths with daily, I interface with quite often. I believe in tapping into the talent of this campus. So for the next few segments, you're going to hear reflections from people who are right here on the campus. Now, what would be a WC program without participation from WC students? Next up, we're going to have reflections from 3 students. Next up, we're going to have reflections from 3 WC students who will share their perspectives on King's legacy. The first student is Duran Crump. He's a 4th-year senior. He's a member of our swim team, and he was involved in several of our programs here on campus throughout his 4-year career. This young man certainly made the most of his time here at Wilmington, and we're going to be sad to see him go. The second person is Jaden Prophet. He's a 3rd-year student here who has been my right-hand man in the area of service and civic engagement. I certainly appreciate Jaden. We have Peyton Mullins, a 2nd-year student who's a member of our Student Government Association. She's an RA, and she's also part of the swim team. And she's certainly a force to be reckoned with for the next few years here on campus. She's certainly a dynamo. And lastly, you will hear from dear friend and colleague of mine, Dr. Michael Snar, who will give his reflections as well. So sit back and enjoy.
Hello, my name is Duran Crump. I am a senior biology major with a minor in chemistry, and I would like to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. today by giving a small reflection on the phrase, you matter. You matter, I matter, we matter. These words can resonate in many different ways. When I think of the phrase, you matter, I think of all the times I told myself these words. Throughout my life, there have been some people who have tried to make me feel as if I do not matter, or there's nothing I can do to reach personal success. And there was times that it felt easier to believe them than to work past them. But every time that these limitations became a little bit too much, I was reminded by my friends and family, these limitations were not made by me. Life is different for everyone. We all have our own stories. But the biggest thing that holds us back in our lives is our mentality. We have to have faith in ourselves to be able to achieve our goals and reach our aspirations. The first step is realizing that you matter. Whether it's where you came from, your cultural background, what religion you follow, whatever it may be, the first step is realizing you matter. When King referenced these words in May of 1966, he gave them the meaning that we all can rise to new heights together. These words still resonate deeply today. These words are part of the driving force that I personally use today. The phrase "you matter" can resonate in many ways, but In its simplest form, it still reads, "You matter." Let's let our goals and our aspirations guide our decisions through life. Let's make great decisions for the betterment of ourselves and for our society. Let's continue to follow in the path of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Let us not let others set our limitations, but be the changing light in our lives and in the world.
Dr. King's legacy means a lot to me and my family, as most of my family has grown up in the South. They experienced a lot of things that Dr. King was fighting to um, sort of take away from the South: segregation, civil rights laws, and things of those natures, things that made it almost impossible to vote. And it just makes me appreciative to grow up in the North, where things didn't really happen um, as they did down south. The way my great grandmother speaks, the way that my grandfather speaks, the way that a lot of my family members speak that have grown up down there, who still feel um, the repercussions of what happened 50, 40 years ago. And it just is very impactful in my life, being able to go down to Alabama and see, or Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, a lot of those places, and where they marched, and just see the impact that they had on the population there and what they were trying to do, and how hard the United States government came down on them in terms of sending law enforcement and things of that nature after them. And that's what makes me do what I want to do in the future, in terms of law enforcement, because I want to change pretty much how it works and how it was back then, because law enforcement today is still um, directly a cause of what's going on now. um, and I want to be a part of the change in what needs to happen, and even reflecting back about Black Lives Matter, and how um, it took a change, it took a turn over the summer. It just breaks my heart to see people in pain, and it's almost like a calling back to history, because what people were doing over the summer is what people were doing uh, in the 60s, marching for their human rights, civil rights, and just the rights to be treated like decent human beings. So his legacy now more than ever means a lot to me, because even with the past events in the Capitol, it shows that in the 21st century, people still um, don't want to acknowledge other people, especially minorities, as an equal human being and having equal rights. I mean, as we've seen, when people do use their rights to vote and things of that nature, that people don't believe that our elections are fair, because people actually believed in their right to vote and went out and did something with it. It shows that when people take things seriously, that things can be done in this country. And it did sort of bring hope, seeing people standing up and voting. Some people even voted for the first time of their lives, and they're in their 30s. It would also kind of make me upset to see that people didn't vote before, and showing that Dr. King. Now, I'm not going to say that Dr. King marched for nothing, but to show that people didn't truly vote or didn't want to, and then going down to Alabama, into the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and seeing that down south, they really made it almost impossible for African Americans to go vote. And then to see now that we have the choice to do so, and people didn't, because they thought either their vote didn't matter, or that they just didn't feel the need to vote. And it makes me sad, because when people don't vote, we end up with situations like we had 4 years ago, where people are stuck with someone they aren't happy with, but they can't be upset because they didn't go out and use their vote. So it means a lot to me, and it means a lot to my great grandparents, who weren't able to vote back when they were in their 20s, to be able to do so now, and to do so without repercussion or any fear. So
My name is Peyton Mullins, I'm a white girl who grew up in a predominantly white school district whose education curriculum was run by older white people, so needless to say, there was never much diversity, but especially in elementary school. I vividly remember Martin Luther King being the first African American I was taught about that was not enslaved and was given a name that we were told that we should remember. You will be tested over this. We learned the basics with the I Have a Dream speech and school segregation, and we learned some other things with little segregation here and there and just the March on Washington and Rosa Parks, but we didn't learn things from a full perspective, and that made me curious. I realized that I didn't have to worry about the things that these people or my classmates were worrying about, and no one had to have a dream for me to receive equal treatment. I didn't have a word for it then, but I was awakened to my privilege. I began to look around and see people for who they were and the struggles that they faced and the value that was held in their lives. I didn't learn enough about culture or race when I was younger, but what little I did learn sparked a desire in me to further my education and learn more about these issues when I was older. Just as Martin Luther King did, I wanted to do things with my whole self. Because if not me, then who? Martin Luther King is extremely influential, but I think it's important to recognize that he died fighting for a cause that could have been ended if people did look inward every now and then and chose to recognize the consequences of the hatred and negativity that lived in their hearts. We have to see other people for just as they are, which is humans. One of my favorite quotes from Martin Luther King is, "The time is always right to do what is right." And I like this because it shows that you're never too late, you're never too far gone. You can always choose to make the right decision and be on the right side of history. I also like the quote, "To ignore evil is to become accomplice to it." And I like this because I feel like a lot of the time we view ourselves as individuals and who can't make a difference. But if we all think that and we all begin to ignore this evil, then we all become accomplice to it. And no change can ever be made that way.
Good evening. I'm honored to be with you this evening. Chip asked me to share a few thoughts about this special occasion, so that's what I'm going to do. Given the current political environment, especially the partisan divide within the United States, and given the recent social unrest, many of us are feeling despair, fear, and other emotions. We need to remember that our country has been divided before. Our country has seen political violence before. This is a time to look for spiritual, social, and political leadership. Unfortunately, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was such a leader. His leadership was forged during a period in American history that bears some similarities to our current situation. I think we need to be reminded that King unapologetically sought nonviolent solutions, in part because he followed Jesus of Nazareth, who demanded Christians love their enemy, but also because he thought it was the only way for lasting peace. Following are some of King's key quotes on love, nonviolence, power, and the beloved community. For King, love is more than a sentimental feeling. It has a depth to it that leads to healing. In his words, "Now there is a final reason I think that Jesus says, 'Love your enemies.' It is this, that love has within it a redemptive power, and there is a power there that eventually transforms individuals." Now many think of nonviolence or pacifism as a way to avoid conflict, or even worse, a cowardly approach to conflict. But people like Gandhi and King argued that it's just the opposite. King says, "My study of Gandhi convinced me that true pacifism is not non-resistance to evil, but non-violent resistance to evil. Between the two positions, there is a world of difference. Gandhi resisted evil with as much vigor and power as the violent resistor. But true pacifism is not unrealistic submission to evil power. It is rather a courageous confrontation of evil by the power of love." King holds up loving strategic nonviolence as a third way, one between fight and flight. He says, there is another way, and that is to organize mass, nonviolent resistance based on the principle of love. It seems to me that this is the only way as our eyes look to the future, as we look out across the years and across the generations. Let us develop and move right here. We must discover the power of love, the redemptive power of love. And when we discover that, we will be able to make of this old world a new world. We will be able to make men better. Love is the only way. Now, King emphasized the critical link between power and love. He argued that they could not be separated. Quoting King again, "What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic." What does King mean here? He is arguing that nonviolence embedded in love is powerful. It works. In fact, it is more powerful than violence. And what is the end goal that King seeks? The outcome? It is the beloved community. First, a note on what the beloved community is not. It is not an attempt for the marginalized and persecuted to turn the tables, to take power and rule over the former power brokers. No, this power structure would violate one of King's most famous positions. That is, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. This quote obviously includes a concern for the oppressed, but it also is concerned with the oppressor. One of the most radical notions of King's Christian-based outlook is a concern for the oppressor. For King, being an oppressor is bad for one's soul. If one oppresses others, they themselves are not free. So King's view is a radical equalizing vision, one where equality and community is the goal, where oppression no longer exists. Inequalities must be bravely, lovingly, and non-violently opposed. We must seek a society where racism no longer exists, where people have access to health care, where extreme poverty is a thing of the past. In short, it is a community where you matter, no matter who you are. I am thankful to Dr. King for this prophetic message, for his message of racial and class harmony. It is a timeless message. It is a message for our time. Thank you.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a great civil rights activist and a great example for us all. But at the core of this man's mission, the platform that he spoke from was the pulpit. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a preacher, y'all. So in honor of Dr. King, we like to incorporate local ministers in our program as well. The next person that you're going to hear reflections from is a local minister here in town who's fairly new to our community. His name is R. Scott Miller, and he's the pastor of the United Methodist Church.
My name is Scott Miller, and I'm the pastor at the Wilmington United Methodist Church. I want to bring greetings from my congregation to the campus of Wilmington College, where we have had such close ties for many years. It is a true honor for me to be invited today to take part of a celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King. When Chip Murdoch told me about today's theme, and it was to be focused on beloved community, I knew the timing couldn't be any perfect. The theme beloved community is much needed thing we need today. We need a reminder of Dr. King's vision today, no differently than when he proclaimed it many years ago. In 1985, I was a freshman making my way to Morehead State University. As I moved into my dorm, I got off the steps, carrying my stuff. The first dorm room I saw had a big old poster of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Now at the time, I didn't know much about fraternities except they used Greek alphabets. I didn't know anything about Greek life. Well, next to the door was this guy, introduced himself as named Michael, and I found out he was my resident advisor. Michael introduced himself to my parents, and he was very gracious and comforting to my parents. He made sure they knew he would be there if I needed anything. It was the perfect thing for me to hear. Actually, didn't matter for me. It was a perfect thing for my parents to hear. So the day could feel comfortable finally leaving and allowing me to be in my new surroundings. What I learned was that Michael was the chapter president of Alpha. That afternoon, after I convinced my parents that I needed some time to set up my room, and finally they left their first child at college, they thought they were leaving me in capable hands. I finished unpacking, set up the room, put up my posters, and of course, turned on my stereo and the loud music. My RA came in. He sat on the other bed, and we began getting to know each other. He let me know he was a chapter president of Alpha Phi Alpha. He told me a little bit about the organization, and that they were one of the fraternities on campus that didn't have a house. So don't be surprised if there's fraternity activities on the floor in the dorm. I later realized what he was talking about. I was one of 3 or 4 guys that were not Alpha. The rest of the floor was Alpha, or prospects. And I didn't really think anything of it until I saw this line of freshmen at his door being interviewed for the fraternity. And then every morning I was woken up early hearing them run through the campus. Now let me stop and explain a little bit about my background. I grew up in northern Kentucky and went to Campbell County High School. There was only one person of a different color from me that was in the school, and that was a teacher. I was sheltered and knew nothing about cultural differences at that point. My first semester of college was on the floor of an African American fraternity. It didn't bother me. I was blessed to be brought up by parents who always encouraged me to accept people that were not the same as me. To look inside, not what's on the outside. The men of Alpha offered me friendship, and I returned it back to them. I later learned they also were watching out for me. Midway through my freshman semester, I came down with an illness. I began to have an acute attack of away-from-home freshmanitis. I was doing late nights with friends and skipping my morning classes, of course. A couple of the Alphas saw what was going on. They came with my RA and reminded me that even though I wasn't in a fraternity, their pledges noticed that I was struggling, and they offered her help and support. Then they let me know they expected me to attend classes just like their pledges were expected to take classes. I didn't skip many more classes. Dr. King said, our goal is to create beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change to our souls, as well as a quantitative change to our lives. That is what happened to this naive freshman dealing with that acute illness called freshmanitis. By the kindness of others, I began to change inside myself. I began to see past the outside of the hearts and into the hearts of people. It didn't make me colorblind. I believe this is a lie that we often try to sell ourselves. Instead, I became welcoming and inclusive in my behavior. I experienced community in a way that changed my understanding of people, even to this day. I learned how to walk rather than to just be there. We're in a day that acceptance seems to come at a cost. We play it safe. We're afraid of going and offending others. We don't want to cause problems. We don't want to upset the apple cart. If we're going to make change in this world, we will be doing some upsetting. We'll find ourselves in the midst of good trouble, as Congressman John Lewis used to say. It means we're going to take some risk. It means we're going to seek out and develop friendships and relationships, even if it's difficult. It means speaking truth in the midst of power. It means being inclusive and accepting of anyone that crosses our path. We need to be moving into a world that allows equality and opportunity for everyone, not just a select few. Dr. King in his writings taught us, over and over again, we need to change the hearts of one person at a time. Dr. King was following the teachings of Jesus. He was teaching kingdom building now, today. We change the world one heart at a time. It begins with community, with our children, with our social circles, with our college campus, even our churches desperately need to be changed. We need fewer people using the title Christian. We really need is more dedicated, true, authentic Jesus followers. We're called to love one another. That is a difficult concept even for a pastor. Sometimes, instead of loving someone, sometimes I want to tell them they're wrong and walk away. I've learned over the years that loving one another means loving without exception, even if the person on the other side of the conversation is wrong. There are ways that community can still be built over time. Changes can happen. Today is a celebration of the legacy of Dr. King, who truly modeled this. If someone didn't agree with him, he kept working at it. We have a lot of work to do. I have a lot of work to do. I hope as you hear other speakers today, you focus on the legacy set before us by Dr. King. My prayers, our focus is to build a beloved community for everybody.
Another tradition that we've incorporated into the MLK program the last few years, and it's been gaining traction, has been that of a poetry contest amongst our student body. This year's recipient of the first place award is a young lady named Sierra Bollinger. She's a first-year student from the Greenfield area. She's already made great impacts on campus, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for this young lady. Sierra is a member of our volleyball team. She's also a member of the ambassador staff in the admission office, and I'm excited to say that she's joining me in the Center for Service and Civic Engagement as well. Here to present her poem, Dreams of Reality, is Sierra Bollinger.
I can't breathe, said Eric Gardner for the 11th time. After being struck with 8 bullets, Breonna Taylor is remembered. I don't have a gun, stop shooting, pleaded Michael Brown. Laquan McDonald moving away after 16 shots. I can't breathe, please, man, George Floyd begged, trapped on the sidewalk. Jacob Blake, critical but stable after 7 shots. What are you following me for? Trayvon Martin asked. These tragedies were called to attention before they occurred. The dreamer begged, pleaded, warned. He said and would say again, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor, it must be demanded by the oppressed. Issues of yesterday are issues of today and will be issues of tomorrow without consideration of the dreamer's dreams. Today is a wake-up call as yesterday was a wake-up call. In the dreamer's dream, out of the mountain of a despair, a hope, a stone of hope. Let us all be a stone to make a mountain, to move mountains.
Friends, we're about to conclude this year's celebration honoring Dr. Martin Luther King. This is the last you're going to see of me, but before I leave, I want to say thank you to everyone who was a part of this program, to the WC community. I want to say thank you for your support of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. To the Wilmington local community, I want to say that Wilmington is here for you as a partner, and thank you for being a partner to us. I think it's appropriate to have closing remarks from our campus minister, so we will certainly have closing reflections from Nancy before we depart. I also believe it's important to maintain the tradition of departing with a hymn. So I've asked Brandy James, 2018 alum, to render us a selection. Following Brandy's selection, I want to share with you an acrostic that was submitted by Sigrid Solomon, our Vice President of Student Affairs and Dean of Students. Along with Sigrid's acrostic, I want to share with you some images from across campus in a video presentation. I want you to see the staff, the students, the faculty who have partnered with me here at Wilmington College regarding the You Matter campaign. And also, there's some images just from today of students that went out into the community in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King and served those in need. That's what makes this place a wonderful place, and it makes me so proud to say that I work here. Now, if you're interested in partnering with us in the You Matter campaign, all it takes is for you to just come and grab a shirt. I've got a few left in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and they're free of charge to you. So if you're interested, reach out to me, and while supplies last, we'll certainly give you a shirt. So on behalf of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, the Office of Service and Civic Engagement, we want to thank you again for participating and being a part of the MLK celebration. Go in peace, and God bless.
Hi, I'm Nancy McCormick, Campus Minister of Wilmington College, and a citizen of Clinton County for 26 years now. And I'm glad to be here and honored that I was asked to share a reflection about my thoughts of Martin Luther King and what it means to be a part of the beloved community, or to go along with our theme to let everyone know that you matter, I matter, we matter. I would like to start with a quote from Martin that states, "I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear, and darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only the power of light will be able to do it." That's a powerful quote for me. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. I'm a child of the 60s. I was born in 1951, and I can recall many of the horrors of the civil rights movement of that time. And as a young girl who grew up in Minnesota, I know what dark days are like physically, and how we longed for the light as children. But I had no idea what children in other parts of our country were going through simply because of the color of their skin. And before I even knew about beloved community, I felt spiritually and almost mystically called into this place of holding people in love and in care. Because as a child growing up with a strong faith, I knew that denying people of their rights was incredibly wrong. And as naive as I probably was as a child, that belief was right. We are called to be in beloved community. I am your sister, and you are my brother. And that comes out strong in the theme of Martin Luther King. George Fox, Quaker leader, has a quote that states, "I saw also there was an ocean of darkness and death, but an infinite ocean of light and love, which flowed over the ocean of darkness." So I ask myself today, during these difficult times, where it seems to me we continue to struggle with how are we to be treating our beloved neighbor in a beloved community? How am I being called to be a light that is filled with the power to unite? A work that is not for the weak, but assigned to people of diligence, a people called to love in the sacred call of Christ. How am I called to accountability as I seek the ways of peace and courage that Martin Luther King calls for? Oh God, help us to walk together, pray together, sing together, and live together until that day when all God's children, black, white, red, and yellow, will rejoice in our common bond. Thank you.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. And sing a song full of the faith that our dark past has taught us. And sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, facing the rising sun of her new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. God of our weary years and God of our silent tears, Thou who has brought us thus far on the way, Thou who has by Thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. And lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met Thee. And lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget Thee. Shadowed beneath the hand, may we forever stand. True to our God, true to our native land. True to our God, true to our native land.